Welcome to the Mullet Gang.
A neurospicy podcast for neurodivergent folks.
We bring the spicy to neurospicy.
We want you to know that you are not alone and you are not too much.
Let's fucking go.
Yeah. All right. So this is our third episode. Welcome. I wanted to thank everyone. The last two episodes, we've gotten a lot of positive feedback and support, and it's like such a cool thing that we get to do this and talk about something we're both really passionate about. And yeah, I've just felt like my heart's been so full. It just feels like our friendship has gotten like so much closer too. Like creating this podcast has brought so much into our lives, and like getting to share about, our stories and um the feelings that we've had, and finally feeling like you're connecting with other people and feeling seen and understood, and like I really feel like now we truly do get each other.
Yes. Totally. I feel like it's been such a journey, even just collaborating like on a project and sharing ideas and like working together and really seeing all our amazing strengths. But then also, some things that we've been through recently, I think has also helped us understand each other and how our brain works. And then the importance of building that community, right? So people can feel connected and know they're not alone in some of these very unique experiences.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think we've kind of let like our followers know a little bit, but like in the process of making this podcast, which has been one of the greatest things ever for me as far as like processing ADHD and feeling again connected to people that also struggle with the same things, is we did end up losing a really close friend of ours. I think some feelings might have been taking place that I personally felt very unaware of. And then when the podcast came out, these feelings were expressed and kind of blindsided me and you.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, this person decided that, we didn't include them in our podcast. We didn't include them in the ideas, and they felt very upset about it and decided that they were going to basically, move forward without a friendship. And
Mhm.
it sucks. We're both still kind of reeling it in and processing it. But, this isn't the first like friend breakup I've had. Um, but again, it doesn't matter how many times you go through it. I think it's always hard. It always sucks. It always hurts.
Mhm.
But at least every time that I do go through it, I'm able to process it differently. And being able to process it with you made it a lot easier, because I felt like, this didn't just happen to me, it also happened to you.
Yes, it was kind of this shared experience that we had, right? And we were able to process it in real time, which I think was so interesting. So as we're getting ready to like launch this podcast and think about different topics and ideas and talk about how unique it is to be neurodivergent and how that shows up in all areas of our life, we have this very real example kind of right in front of us. So being able to use that, I think, on the podcast and share with our listeners, that's going to be really impactful to say, hey, we're not just like talking about this in like an abstract way and just citing research. We are also sharing real lived experience in real time and talking about how we navigate it and some of the challenges with things going on in our life. And I think for both you and I, that really brought up this idea of adult relationships and friendships
Hmm.
and being neurodivergent and how challenging that can be. And some of the challenges that we have with even just like setting boundaries and communicating if we're not doing the work or not self-aware. And both you and I really wanting to lean more into this idea of setting boundaries, being assertive, standing up for ourselves, and leaning into our strengths, but also finding ways to overcome some of those roadblocks.
Yeah. I mean, definitely, I feel like, processing our points or pain points in life is part of the journey that we both have decided to be on with this, self-discovery slash self-work. Like we have to
Mhm.
do the work, and we in this process with our friend, that we lost, and we did try to communicate We did try to make it work. We did try to gain understanding. You
Mhm.
know, if anyone's ever mad at me, I'm not going to tell them that their feelings are invalid. I just need to know why and how because of the way that I do process things. And because of the fact that there are a lot of challenges with having ADHD and communicating that can feel very like blindsided. You know, sometimes people are mad at you and you had no idea. And
Mhm.
that shock first is very strong because
Mhm.
you're confused. You want to be defensive because there's no way in hell you would ever intentionally hurt anybody.
Mhm. Mhm.
You know, that's one thing I really wanted to convey to this friend was that like there was never any intention of hurting you. There was never a plan to hurt you. There was never a plan to make you feel left out. That was never the goal in this. The goal in this was for both of us to you know, do a deeper dive into this journey and to become advocates for mental health, you know, and we both have been doing the work separately for so long that this is something that we both like, who would have thought we would have connected so deeply on this, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, and so yeah, it's hard. It is hard. It's a very hard thing to go through. And um I think, you know, this was actually one of the things that we did write down as something we wanted to cover so badly when we were going to
Mhm.
make the podcast before the podcast even came into existence. We're like, we need to talk about this. And who would have thought that it would actually happen as we did the podcast?
Yeah, it's wild. I mean, even re-listening to episode 2 that we launched yesterday, we were talking about a lot of these themes already with unmasking, becoming authentic, talking about other like friendship breakups that we've had and how devastating that was to feel ghosted or that someone just quite quit the relationship without that clear communication. I think ultimately that's what it comes down to, right? Like there are going to be a lot of misunderstandings. We all kind of function based on our own perception of reality and create our own narrative. I think in this recent example, that was a big part of it. Someone got their feelings hurt and felt left out. Again, valid. Now, talking through maybe why they felt that way and what our intention was, I think was the missing piece. And we weren't given the opportunity to say, hey, I'm so sorry, you know, that you're experiencing this, and that's totally valid. And I want to understand more about that. And I also want you to understand where we're coming from so that we can all come together and move forward from this and learn. But when you're not given the opportunity to resolve things, to talk through it, to communicate, unfortunately, it is hard to just move past that and process it or give yourself closure.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you know, I think for a lot of people listening who have diagnosed ADHD, before you got your diagnosis or before you understood your diagnosis, there's a period where you're like, what is wrong with me? Why do I keep, you know, attracting these situations? And I think you need to understand that there are strengths and there are challenges to being friends with someone who is neurodivergent, and that, you know, it's okay to communicate you know, your challenges or your weaknesses or things that you know can cause issues in communication. But it's also good to celebrate for yourself, like, you know, the kind of friend that you are.
Mm-hmm.
Because when these things happen, it's good to kind of reflect, like, you know, you are not the problem. Because the first
Mm-hmm.
thing I do, and then the first thing I did in this situation was like, try to blame myself. I must have done something wrong. It must have been, it's me. I'm the broken one. There's something wrong with me. This is why this always happens to me.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, I think the issue too is like whenever you go through these things, you start to blame yourself because you have ADHD. You start to think that there's something wrong with you. You start to think that, you know, this always happens to me. Like I'm always the issue. I'm not, you know, my brain doesn't do the things that it needs to do to communicate right. And, you know, that sucks. It's like not the issue and that's not the reason. And other people have to take accountability too. I mean, there are so many strengths of having a friend with ADHD as well as challenges.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, you know, for me, I know I have to celebrate the kind of friend that I am in order to like make sense of everything, you know? And in order to really heal from the pain of losing a friend, you have to remind yourself what your worth is because any kind of breakup is always going to make you feel that rejection, that that worthlessness feeling because you put so much into something, and for someone just to say, nah, I'm done with you, it
Mhm.
sucks. It's heavy.
Mhm. Yeah, it really is. And, when we think about our strengths and what we bring to a friendship, there is so much. And I think that's not talked about enough. Often we just hear about the challenges and why relationships are hard, but there are so many great qualities that we have as ADHDers, right? Like we have so much empathy and compassion for other people. We can relate deeply to their feelings and their experiences, but sometimes at our own expense, even because we can understand and we have so much of that empathy we may take on like an over responsibility, like you said, where it's like, oh, it's all my fault. Let me fix it all. Let me apologize. Let me take all the accountability. And then we may compromise our own boundaries. But we are able to really understand people and why they're behaving the way that they are and why that they're saying things. So we can give them lots of grace because that's something that we typically have been through. And so we're like, oh, I get it. We understand maybe why you did that or said that. So we can be very forgiving, but we have to be careful not to have that as like a slippery slope where we forgive too much and then tolerate too much.
No people pleasing.
Yes, yes, that's something that we're all trying to break out of. And I think we are very honest and loyal, right? Like we really like to be honest and have that clear communication if we're able to break out of the people pleasing and just be real in our friendships, to be authentic, to really tap into like that deep connection, to really see our friends and understand them and support them. And we are very loyal, right? Like we're always going to have our friends back and stand up for them. So I think that's a really valuable quality. We will fight for our friends in our
Oh,
relationship.
I will always hate the people in your life more than you will.
Yes, yes. And
I'll always fight your battle stronger than anyone else, right?
any haters of mine, right? Like, or haters of yours, like it's like a mutual thing. We're like, ah, don't come from my bestie. Don't come from
Yeah.
my friend.
Yeah. We're always like protective of each other.
Yeah, I think those are huge qualities. Also, we're a lot of fun. We're very like spontaneous and
Very spontaneous.
adventurous, right? We have a sense of humor. I think we're willing to take risk and kind of do things that may be unexpected. And so it's always a good time. There's always a lot of laughter and fun. We're always up for something new. And that does bring a lot to a friendship. I think we also have kind of this contagious energy, right?
Yeah.
Like this big energy that people want to be around and makes them feel good.
Yes, listen, I think having a friend with ADHD or a romantic partner is like one of the best things you can have, honestly.
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
think that you'll never have a dull moment. You never know what's going to come out of their mouth, but they're also going to spring on some really fun ideas, some really crazy creative ideas that you would have never thought of. I mean, how many times, do you just spontaneously say, "Hey, Sunday fun day, let's do all these great things," and it's a blast. Like it really can be so fun. When you are friends with somebody with ADHD, you definitely can they see you before you see them. They see your potential. They see your glow. They see the great things about you. They want to know you. They want to understand you because that's something that when I collect friends, it's like I just want to know this person. I'm so fascinated by people and how they work and how they think and I don't know. No judgment. I never want to judge anyone for their story. I can disagree with them, but I'm not going to just hate them for who they are or be weary of them or, not want to be their friend just because we may not connect the way that I would want.
Mhm.
And I like that about us. I think that, we've been like that since we were kids. I know that for a fact. And
Mhm.
even till this day, whenever we go out, we're always chatting it up with strangers and trying to be their buddy. Um, so yeah, ADHD friends are cute.
Yes, yes. Just, always having an open mind, wanting to meet new people, wanting to learn about people. And I think for us, we want to kind of bulldoze right through like all the superficial nonsense and small talk. We're like, tell me your story, tell me your trauma, tell me everything about you. I want to know you, at your deep, core level. I don't want to just know all this fake stuff. So if we can find someone who is willing to open up and share that with us, I think it can be a great connection. But for certain people, it may make them a little uncomfortable, or they might not understand why we're asking these questions. And some people may get defensive or kind of shut down because they're like, why do you want to know all this stuff? Why are you
Yeah.
so curious or investigating? And it's really just this deep interest in understanding people and learning about them so that we can connect and find those commonalities.
Yeah, it's like just the curiosity of the world, right? Like I think that having that kind of a brain disorder like makes you want to be curious about everything and everyone.
Mhm.
I know as kids we used to get in trouble for like being friends with people on the street that could have been dangerous.
Yeah.
I mean, true story, Amy and I one time walked all of downtown Orlando with a homeless man and we just listened to his stories, and I was fascinated by how he knew every single person that worked in every single bar and club in Orlando.
Hmm.
And we were I remember we were like getting into all these places for free because we were his friend. And
Yes.
um could that have been a very dangerous situation? Absolutely. But it just added to our interest in adventure.
Yeah, yeah, we love to understand people and where they're coming from. And I think that can also be a frustration when people won't let us in. They won't share that with us because we want to know, we want to understand, especially if someone is upset with us or there's conflict. We want to try to fix it or figure it out, right? Like, where did this misunderstanding come from? How did it happen? How do we fix it? How do we move forward? How do we learn from it? But when someone just blocks us or shuts us down, it's very frustrating, right? Because if there's a misunderstanding, well, let's talk about it, right? Like, I'm ready. Let's talk about our feelings and talk about where this came from, because most of the time it really is a misunderstanding. And I think most issues can be resolved in a friendship with clear communication and honesty. And so I think that's a great strength of ours that we want to do that. But unfortunately, some people aren't there or willing to, which causes us deep distress and rejection sensitivity, because then we feel like we did something wrong or it's all our fault. And then we take on that self blame.
Yeah, I mean, there are challenges with being friends with someone that has ADHD. There's a lot of forgetfulness that will happen.
Mhm.
And I know that that can be something that triggers other people who are neurotypical because, how could you forget? I told you we were going to do this whole thing, or, I said that this day I wanted you to come over for a special thing. Like it just, I'm I'm very by my book. Like I have to write things down because if I
Mhm.
don't, I will forget them.
Mhm.
Also, I think that a lot of us, struggle with time blindness, and that's another reason why I think sometimes neurotypical friends can get frustrated because they don't understand that, I'm one of those people that I love knowing what time it is, but I hate knowing what time it is. Like, I never want to wear a watch, especially on
Mhm.
vacation. I do not want to know what time it is ever on vacation.
Mhm.
But I've been around people who that's very important to them to keep them regulated, and we clash because it's just like I don't care. I don't want to know. And they want to know every detail of the day.
Mhm.
But time blindness can also be a big challenge for me because of the fact that like I will often be late to things, or I think I have enough time and really I don't, and I'm trying to do 20 things in 10 minutes.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, but these challenges, like they can really hinder you, keeping some friendships, especially if you find that you don't have friends with ADHD and all your friends are neurotypical in the friend group. That can be quite difficult because then they start to notice, like, oh, did you ever, realize that Susie gets a little bit emotional, or she's very, overshares too much or takes over a whole conversation. Like, she's
Mhm.
too much. And I think you and I have talked about that too. Like, uh feeling like that's the one thing we want our listeners is to understand, that you're never too much, that just is part of ADHD, is that because you have all these thoughts going off at once, you're a lot, but it's not too much, especially if you find the right people.
Mhm.
um
Yeah, I think it's important to acknowledge that if you're neurodivergent, anyone in your life that's close to you has to understand how your brain works, right? Whether they're neurodivergent themselves, which, there's kind of that understanding already, or if they're not, they're willing to learn, because a lot of these challenges go back to the misunderstanding, right? Like, I think people that are neurotypical take it personal. Like, if you're late or forgetful, you're like, what did you tell me again? Or what was that date? We may forget like important details or important dates, and not because we don't care, but because we have working memory issues. We may often be late or mismanage our time, not because we don't care, but because we have time blindness, right? Even like you mentioned, the oversharing. I think often people with ADHD, we get so excited to like connect on a topic or conversation. We want to jump in. We want to say, hey, me too. Like, I have a very similar experience or story. Can we talk about it? And we get so excited and maybe impulsive where we might interrupt or take over the conversation. And not that we're trying to be selfish or self-absorbed, but we're just so excited that we have something that we can share or interject. I think people may misinterpret that as, well, geez, I was telling my story and there you are like jumping in to tell your story. So a lot of these things come from a good place, right? We're trying to connect and we really do care. But I think if people don't understand these challenges, they think that we're just being insensitive or jerks, or we don't
Yeah.
really value them.
She thinks she's like everything. Yeah.
Yeah, it's all
Doesn't
about
care about
her.
my life. And that was something that I was accused of in the whole thing with our friend breakup recently, is that, you know, um, they were pointing out that I wasn't engaging with them on social media. And like the truth is, I don't sometimes engage with a lot of my close friends on social media because if I'm hyper fixated on something, I'm actually not even on my account. I'm probably on my spam account looking up the 100th pasta recipe of the day.
Mm-hmm.
Like what you were just saying about, you know, people thinking that we're just all about ourselves and we don't care about their life and we're not checking in enough and we're not asking them about their kids. Like, it's not personal, and that's something that I wish I could go back and tell, our friend, is that like, hey, this was not a personal thing. Like, I would never not care about your life. It's just that I hyperfixate on a lot of things that go on in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And especially like with my job, my salon business, like it
Mm-hmm.
takes up a lot of mental real estate. And social media to me is not the way we gauge whether or not someone cares about you. You and I have been engaging in each other's posts for a while now, and so I think both of us just come up on our feed.
Yeah.
And that doesn't make me love my other friends less,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that that's something that when you get accused of that, when anytime anyone wants to point out any of these things that you're not doing enough of, it hurts more because you know that those are your weaknesses.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's already a sensitivity to that or insecurity. And so when someone then brings that up, it's like, oh, right? Like, I know, and I'm working on it. I'm trying my best. And, feeling that your best is not enough sometimes is hard. And I think it's so important to have lots of grace in our relationships because we're not going to be perfect, even if we're self-aware. I think with ADHD, like our capacity is already limited as far as what we can manage throughout our day, what we can focus on and pay attention to. And there's this concept of like object permanence too, which is kind of out of sight, out of mind. So we're so fixated on just like surviving our day and taking care of our family and running our business and managing our household and taking care of ourselves. Sometimes we don't always have the capacity to show up in the way that we would like for our friends because we are trying to just survive and work on our own executive functioning. And then, like you said, with social media, like if something's not popping up right there and it's not top of mind, we may not have the time or capacity to go like digging or searching, similar to like a long distance friend. If someone's not in our face all the time and we're interacting with them, sometimes we actually forget that people exist. Not that we don't care, but again, it's memory. It's, if someone's not here or we're not seeing things pop up or they're not messaging us, it's hard for our brain to remember because there's so many other things that we're trying to regulate. So just helping people understand it's not personal. If we didn't like your post or look at your story or respond to your text right away, it may be a capacity issue. We may be dysregulated. We may feel overstimulated or overwhelmed. We may kind of be isolating and withdrawing a little bit because we need to care for ourselves. So we might not have the capacity to show up that day, but we always come back around, right? And I think the burden is really on the person that is feeling offended in some way. If someone's like, hey, I noticed that you haven't been engaging with me on social media, or you haven't responded to my last text. Is everything okay? Did you miss it? Are you busy? What's going on? Like, just for our friends to be able to check in and get clarity and understand maybe why we aren't showing up in the same way or in the way that they expect, and to help them understand that it's never intentional and we never mean to hurt anyone.
Right. I also think it's kind of lame to like accuse people before you understand what's going on with them, but that's just me. I think also that comes with like running a business and having all these projects and things that you do. I think the busier you are, the more you realize that like in reality, adults, we don't always have the mental capacity to check in with every single friend, you know? And something that I've learned, and this is something that gives me a lot of joy, is that I like to see my friends doing their own thing. I like to celebrate their wins. If my two best friends are hanging out without me, I'm not going to get mad. I'm going to be happy for them that they're getting that time together, that they're doing something together, whether that's, you know, going on a trip or having coffee. Like, we do not own people. And I know I've said this before, but that's something that I've really, once I really got that in my head, that like we don't own anybody, that people have the right to do whatever they want and flourish other relationships, that's like the true, to me, that's what really makes a friendship, you know, so valuable, is that you can celebrate my wins, you can celebrate my other relationships, you can see that I'm trying to go out there and flourish and thrive, basically.
Mhm.
um because we can't just have our only one friend, you know, we have to be able to make other connections to grow as people and to have more insight as people.
Mhm.
I mean, it was really tough to be in the situation, and I think that, you know, I think that we did try to handle it as best as we could, and that it wasn't personal. And I love how you phrase that. Like, it's just not fucking personal.
Yeah. It's our brain, it's neurology. And I think when people can understand that, like, these things are challenging for us and we can try our best to overcome it, but we also need room for grace and understanding. And people need to be willing to learn why we behave or respond in a certain way and why we show up. And I think often we're prone to burnout socially because we're working so hard to get people to understand us or to understand them, that sometimes it just becomes too much to manage friendships, right? We're like, damn, after I hang out with this person or talk to this person, there's just so much processing and regulation that has to happen that now I don't have the capacity to show up for my family or for my business. So it can be really exhausting to have friendships in that way, where people aren't willing to understand us or have these conversations or give us grace, because that also causes the masking, right? We kind of fall into this like people pleasing, masking version just to avoid conflict and to be understood or accepted. But you can only maintain that for so long. And I think the older that I get, I realize that's a non-negotiable, right? And kind of going to back to boundaries. Like, I need people in my life that understand my brain and that are willing to learn about my brain and kind of hear where I'm coming from versus making assumptions or jumping to conclusions about my behavior.
Right. And that's something too that you have really kind of helped me with, in this situation, and we talked about a lot, was the fact that like we do not have to have this anxiety about losing a friend and personalize it so much and punish ourselves, truly, is what I felt like I was doing at one point.
Mhm.
Like, we have to see our worth, we have to see what we bring to the table, we have to know that sometimes it's not us, it's them, and that
Mhm.
these are their issues, and if they're not willing to do the fucking work, then they're not really, you know, important enough to keep around.
Mhm.
um you know, and I think you turning that narrative into my reality really helped me grow a lot this week as a person, because it's like, you know, you're right. Like, why am I trying to save somebody? You know, why am I trying to be the hero again and people please again and be so sensitive to their fucking shortcomings? Like, they're the ones not going, and doing the personal growth work. They're the ones who are not communicating correctly. They're the ones who are willing to throw something away over feeling hurt versus trying to fix it. And
Mhm.
there's nothing wrong with fixing things, of course, but we can't fix people. We can't fix people who aren't willing, right? And I
Yes.
think that when you started sending me a lot of this inspiration, I was like, man, you're fucking right. Like, how often do I do this? And not just with friendships, but old boyfriends or family members, even, you know, even like coworkers or stylists that have like worked for me or even clients. You try to fix them as people, you try to make them work. And really, there's no reason for that. They have to be doing the work. They have to be making those changes. They have to have those self-awarenesses, you know?
Yes, yes. We only can be responsible for ourselves, right? We can't control other people. And I think because we have so much compassion and empathy, we try to be so mindful and understanding and help other people, but at our own expense. So I think both you and I are learning that we can be kind, we can have empathy and compassion for our friends and people in our life, but also set healthy boundaries and kind of have those non-negotiables to say, I need clear and honest communication. I need you to express your feelings to me in a way that I can understand. I cannot tolerate fakeness or people pleasing. I'm not a mind reader, right? Like, I need you to be able to communicate your feelings. I need you to be doing work and developing emotional intelligence. I need you to respect me and give me grace. So, really kind of feeling empowered through this whole situation to say, you know what, I can still be kind and considerate and have all these great qualities, but not compromise my own mental health and well-being. And I think you and I have been on this journey in the last few weeks, really starting to stand up for ourselves and say, you know what, I don't have to tolerate this. I don't have to do this little dance and try to make you happy and people please and have all this anxiety. I can take accountability and ownership from my part. I can listen and understand your feelings, but I also have a right to protect my peace. And I think that's been a big change for both of us.
Yeah, it definitely has. And I think too, like, not drowning in their sorrows, right? Like, not feeling sorry for ourselves because somebody wasn't willing to do the work.
Mhm.
Why take that on? Why put that on? Why blame ourselves? I
Mhm.
think that finally I figured out that little missing link of, you know, all these years blaming myself for these things that I struggle with, and that not being the point, right? Like, you're not supposed to blame yourself. You're really just supposed to empower yourself. You can feel hurt, you can feel disappointed, but you can't blame yourself for other people, ghosting you or getting mad at you. We've extended the olive branch. We've definitely did our best to communicate and reach out, and yet we never saw anything come from that. We never saw any kind of um, openness. And I think that that's the part that hurts the most.
Yeah, it's so important for us to feel safe and secure in our friendships, to know that we have room to make mistakes and resolve things and move forward. But if we feel like any wrong move, we can get canceled or dropped or ghosted, like that's a very scary feeling. And I think that really feeds into the rejection sensitivity, right? And yes, everyone hates rejection, but when you have ADHD, it can be debilitating, like paralyzing, this idea that someone is rejecting you at your core or dropping you for one wrong move. Like that type of anxiety in a friendship, it's like if I say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing, this person literally will just drop me and there's not an opportunity for resolution or compromise. And I think both of you and I were just like shocked with that. Like, really? We're not going to be able to have a conversation? Like, that's it? Like, one thing that was done and boom, the friendship's over. Like, that feels very unsafe and can cause a lot of issues with trust moving forward. So, feeling safe in our relationships that we can have those conversations, that people are going to be honest about how they're feeling so we don't have to guess, and that we have the opportunity to work through things and talk about it, right? Because if we don't feel that way, it's going to be this constant anxiety and fear that someone's upset with us and we don't know. And I think that's the worst feeling ever. Like someone has some jealousy, resentment, anger towards us and it's not being communicated, but we can feel the energy shift. We are
Uh,
really good at pattern recognition. And so any slight change in communication, energy, behavior, like our brains are going to know something's off. But if someone's not communicating, we don't know exactly why. So we'll just come up with 100 different scenarios in our brain and start ruminating about it.
Yeah, I hate being able to like pick up energy in a room. I fucking hate it, dude. Like anytime I walk into a room and I can tell someone's angry with me or the vibe is off, it is like the most awkward thing ever.
Yeah.
Um, as a boss, I feel it all the time. If I change a rule or, make a shift in the salon that nobody likes, like you walk in the salon and you can instantly feel it, or when there's, some kind of conflict between family members or you know, uh, just that energy shift is very real. And it's really crazy because I always thought I was just a witch, but now I realize that it was just heightened awareness for my ADHD. Um, yeah, the walking on eggshells is something that I think, is sad because so many people do it
Hmm.
and they don't get any breaks from that.
Yeah. And I don't think that's sustainable, right? Like that just constant kind of paralysis of, did I do the wrong thing? Did I say the wrong thing? Is this person upset with me? So I think that's something that you and I appreciate about each other. Like we are so open and honest. We're constantly communicating about our feelings and it's never too much, right? Like we can talk about the same situation 100 times and process it over and over again. And we both kind of create that space and room for each other.
Yeah, I think that's what makes, our friendship so strong too.
I think, regardless of this whole situation and how challenging it has been for you and I, it has highlighted a lot about our ADHD and how that manifests in friendships. And we've been kind of learning through this lived experience and then also sharing it with our community. And there definitely have been some takeaways and I think some growth after you and I have processed it. So for me, that definitely is the importance of like setting boundaries and asserting myself, learning that I can be kind and compassionate and care about my friends and love them, but not compromise my own well-being. So understanding that boundaries aren't an attempt to push someone away. It's an attempt to keep someone in our life, to say, hey, I want to care for me and care for you. I want this relationship to work. I'm fighting for it. These boundaries are necessary to move forward. And my personal boundaries, again, go back to clear, honest communication. I don't want to be in my head ruminating about what you're thinking and feeling. I just want you to tell me and we can hash it out, talk through it like adults and move forward. So just not faking things or having people tell me what I want to hear and be these like people pleasers. Like I'm trying to break away from people pleasing. I need my friends to also not be people pleasers because that doesn't feel safe. Like if you're just pleasing me and telling me what I want to hear, you're not being honest or genuine to yourself. People respecting, my boundaries as far as space and time. If I don't have the capacity to show up or do something or be available because I'm caring for myself or I'm burnout or overwhelmed, to have grace and understanding that I'm not like ghosting you or opting out of the friendship just because I don't respond right away or I might be a little more quiet. It just probably means that I have stuff going on or I'm busy, so friends that can kind of give me that space and have that grace and compassion, having room for mistakes, being able to make mistakes and kind of fumble, but having that grace and compassion and having the opportunity to talk through that and make sure there are no misunderstandings. Right. And then having support, having people that will support me and love me and celebrate my wins and my success and not get jealous and not feel insecure. Right. Because my success doesn't take away from my friend's success. And if I'm hanging out with another friend or having another relationship, it's not taking away from that relationship. So it's not a competition. We're all adults. We want to celebrate our friends and their success and not have that bring on any insecurity. And if it does, then that's some self-work that that person needs to do. And we can't take ownership for that. So those are some of my takeaways and boundaries that I've really learned through this whole experience.
Yeah, I actually my boundaries sound pretty similar to yours. Um, I think that something that took me a while with boundaries to understand, and this is because I had to reread Brene Brown over and over and over again, because it just was so hard for me to set boundaries because that's just something I cannot do, but I do now. And you know, these boundaries that I create I create for myself so that I don't hurt myself. So I
Mhm.
keep myself safe. They're not really to keep people out, they're just to keep me from getting too caught up. And something that I think is an important boundary is I always want there to be openness. I always want there to be vulnerability. And, I'm not going to allow for anyone to put things on me.
Mhm.
Don't make me feel like I'm too much because you're mad. Don't
Mhm.
make me feel like your lack of communication is my fault. If you're frustrated, that's fine. We can talk about it. But don't put that frustration out on me and make it look like it's something that I did. Because at
Yeah.
the end of the day, you are only human. You're doing your best. You're putting your best foot forward. And there's no reason for anyone to come for you out of spite, out of jealousy, out of hurt. True friends don't come for each other. That's how I feel. And I think that that's something that I've been talking about for a long time. But this last situation really brought it home for me. A true friend is not going to make you feel like shit just because they're angry with you.
Yeah, I think ghosting is such a hard thing to process because we don't get that closure. We don't get that opportunity to communicate or resolve the issue or explain ourselves, right? So we feel understood. And so we have to have that safety and security in a friendship that we know we're going to have grace and we're going to have the opportunity to communicate things. And to be just dropped suddenly is kind of our worst fear. And so when that does happen, it shakes you up a little bit and you're like, well, damn. And at the end of the day, we have so many great strengths, which we talked about. And I think we make great friends, but we also have some challenges that make it really hard. And for me, and I think you, a non negotiable is someone has to understand that. They have to understand that we have ADHD, that it absolutely does impact our relationships and the way that we show up. Whether our friends have ADHD or not, they have to understand our brain, how it works, and be willing to learn about it and appreciate it. Appreciate our strengths and superpowers, but also have grace with our challenges, like any human being.
Yeah.
That's what really matters.
Yeah. And if you do go through a friend breakup, it's really important that you do talk to your inner circle, people who really understand you, people who know your heart, who know what you're about. Um, Another way that I was able to process this was talking to my family and other close friends and just hashing out all the little bits of this situation because I wanted to make sure that I really did do all that I could to extend, an olive branch and make it right. But sometimes it's not about you. And I think that that holds a lot of weight for me. It's
Mhm.
not you always fucking up that causes these things to happen. Other people have issues.
Mhm.
Um, and so, yeah, I think that, you got to celebrate your wins and you've got to be able to see your worth in the situations. And hopefully, you take that time to really feed into your power.
Yes, I love how you shared about utilizing your support system. I think we are processors. Like we need to process information and have that support. So leaning on your support system, those people that know your character, that love you, that understand you, that can give you that real feedback and be honest with you, to have that personal reflection time, but also to realize that you can't take ownership for everything. You only can own up to your own behavior, your own communication and response. You can't take ownership for other people and their behavior and their maybe lack of awareness or work. And so we can show up for people, we can be understanding, but I think it's okay to also require them to take accountability and do their own work.
Mhm.
And we can't control that, right? So kind of surrendering to that and we do our best. So I think it's been such a great learning experience. I think it's a great topic. So many people struggle with adult friendships. And then when you're neurodivergent, it just adds an additional layer, right? So I think it's great that we're talking about it. And I know we'll continue to have conversations about just relationships in general and how we can have challenges, but also all the great stuff that we bring to any relationship that we're in.
That's right. Well, thank
Yay.
you for always being open and honest with me. I really value that in our friendship, and I appreciate you for just letting me be me, you know?
Yes, likewise. I love our friendship and I love the fact that it's always growing and evolving. It's never just stagnant, right? Like we're always learning more about each other and bonding and processing new information. So I think that's a great thing. And we are communicating constantly about what's going on in our life and how we're feeling. So there's never any question or misunderstanding. So I appreciate our relationship so much. And hopefully our listeners have learned more about their brain and how to navigate relationships based on that.
Yeah, breakups are not fun and they're not easy, but with a support system, I think you can get through them.
Absolutely. Well, awesome. This was a great episode. I
Thank
look forward to
you.
launching this one and future recordings. So thanks for listening, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.